Hey folks, I have no professional financial training. This is just an idea on the when things made sense to me after taking a look at thousands of YouTube videos. So, like any other financial advice, take a look at it, ask other people about it, ask financial professionals about it, etc., etc. Just don't follow this blindly. Okay, when I became 40, I knew I needed a plan for retirement. My company did not offer a pension, so I just had it in my 401k and just kind of like put it there blindly. Just kept on, adding to it and stuff, but I never figured out how much I needed or anything like that. The first thing I needed to do is I had to figure out how much it took me to live per month. So I guessed at the numbers for food, housing, vacations, auto loans, etc., but my guesses were way off. So I used professional free software like Fidelity's FullView, Personal Capital, Quicken, and etc., and loaded my credit cards, my car payments, my house payment, rent, checking accounts, and etc. into the program. So I loaded all that stuff, so everything that I spent went into these a couple of programs. I didn't use just one because you never know if there's a software bug, and one could be missing a particular credit card or whatever. So I used a couple so that I would know that if my expenses for, let's say, housing on one, it should equal housing on the other. So this is kind of a snapshot of what happened. So after several months, it started to level out and give me a rough idea on how much it took for me to live, for food, rent, all that stuff. So I wasn't guessing. So I had more confidence in the numbers. Okay. So first thing I did was I also created an emergency fund that was based on these numbers. So I put off to the side enough cash money to be able to live on for a particular amount of time that I felt comfortable with before I would get my next job. And this money is not calculated. I didn't calculate that money into my retirement plan. So, like I said, I started planning for retirement when I was 40. I took a look at a lot of YouTube videos, asked certified financial planners how to figure out how much I needed for retirement. The answers I got were like you needed a 70-30 portfolio, 60-40 portfolio. Um, Here's a lifetime retirement fund, if you want to retire by this date and all that stuff. But it didn't make sense to me because they didn't know how much I was spending. So how could they tell me how conservative or how much risk I needed to take on to get to retirement? So I wanted to retire like right around 60 here. And then, with this budget in here, I also calculated in after a few years I got any, major expenses that I didn't really calculate for, right? So I threw in there was an HVAC replacement, a major medical bill, things of that nature. So it all kind of leveled out in the end. But, this is adjustable, right? Because who knows, you might pay off your house or all of a sudden, you have a major medical bill. All those need to be calculated in here for you to feel comfortable with the numbers. The whole idea is that you're going to be more comfortable with the numbers if you don't guess and you actually use real data and you add what in you think you add back in what you think can possibly happen to you. So I got this graph from YouTube video someplace. It made sense to me, but here's the cost of my lifestyle. And So when I put in my cost of my lifestyle, I didn't take out vacations or anything like that because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to save money that way. In other words, you're living your life. Your life is going on and it's only so long, right? So if you don't take vacations, you don't reward yourself, it's going to be like trying to lose weight. You're going to be on the diet for a while, but then after a while, um, most people give up and go back to their old habits. But what made sense to me is when I started down here, I went with more risk. So I had everything in ETFs and mutual funds that were oriented towards equities. Okay. I didn't have any bonds or anything like that because, for example, like if I would have had it in, let's say, a high yield savings account, it probably would have went up, but it probably would have went up, like right along here. And then I would have shown up at retirement that, at age 60 with some money, but not enough money to retire on. So what's the point if I can't retire? Why is having all this money and you're not going to spend it? You're just going to retire. You try to retire on it, and I'd have to push it back. So I calculated in with the retirement calculators. I used several retirement calculators like Fidelity's, Personal Capital, Bolden. There's a bunch of them, and tried to get them all to agree where I was financially. Okay, so down here I had like, for myself, I had more in equities. I had like all equities, and then as I got closer and closer, right, to this point, I backed off. I became conservative because with equities, it's going to bounce up and down, right? But in the end, over a long period of time, it's going to beat, let's say, a high yield savings account. That's the idea. So down here, I didn't care whether it went up or down because I wasn't going to use the money. There was no point in grabbing that money. So, like during the financial crisis of 2008, I just kept on investing. I just kept on putting money in, saying, if I pull out now, where does it go? It would sit in cash, and then maybe 2 to 3 years from now, the market goes straight up and I would miss it, right? So I just gave up trying to outguess the market. But when I got through to here, I said, okay, I'm going to have to back off. I'm going to have to get some bonds or something like that, right? Because I don't want my portfolio to all of a sudden take a dump and then be out of this zone, right? So from here to here, I went a little bit more conservative. But here, I actually had enough money to retire, right? Based on Monte Carlo simulations, rate sequence of returns. I threw in some major medical problems, nursing home, all that stuff. I threw it in there, and it said I had enough, but I did not want to miss that window. But my job was good, and I was getting paid well, so I just kept on working in hopes to getting laid off. Well, later on in life, I didn't get laid off. And then I saw friends that were actually passing away um, at work, and I said, I've got more money than I do time. Okay? I got plenty to live on, so at this point, I'll retire. And then all of a sudden, there was a burst in the stock market and stuff like that, and I got up to here. And so I said, okay, I've got more. Every retirement calculator, every person I talk to says I've got more money than I'll ever need. So I went and put risk on because, who knows? Maybe it'll, double, triple, whatever, right? But if I'm only driving one car and have a couple cars and I'm only eating so much food and I live in one house and yada, 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 my lifestyle hasn't changed, then this is just going to increase and I should never have to use this. Okay? So if it bounces around a bit, I really don't care. So this was the first thing I did when I was planning for retirement, and now I'm comfortable. I don't have to worry about anything. So leave me a comment in the comment sections of what you think, or an idea that you have, or a better way to do it. But I just use multiple budgeting calculators to make sure that the cost of my lifestyle was accurate, and then I added in other things along the timeline, and then I used multiple retirement calculators, and then talked to some financial advisors, the free steak dinner thing, and they said, "Oh yeah, you're good to go." So tell me what you think in the comments. Thanks a lot. But this is the first thing. I'm going to make other slides about other topics in retirement, but this is just part one. Thanks a lot.